everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Marry Your Content and Business Processes for Intelligent Automation. My name is Teresa Resick, and I'm the Director of Online Events at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of our festivities today. And joining me are John Mancini from AIIM and also Thomas Demler from OpenText. OpenText is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And as we get started, just want to share a few tips for participating in today's webinar. And by joining the event live, you can resize the windows in front of you. You can open the group chat so that you can message with each other and also with us. You can download the resources we have for you. There's a lot of really good resources over there. And also do ask questions of the speaker throughout our time today, and use the Q&A feature for that. And we'll do our best to get to all of those questions later in the webcast. And certainly you can ask for any technical assistance with Q&A as well. Later, please take the survey, and I truly value your feedback on how we did today. And then also this webinar is being recorded, and it is going to be posted to AIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. And now I want to take the opportunity to introduce our two speakers we have with us. John Mancini is the Chief Evangelist of AIIM, and he is a well-known author and speaker on information management and digital transformation. And as a frequent keynote speaker, John offers his expertise on digital transformation and the struggle to overcome information chaos with intelligent information management. John has published scores of ebooks, many of which can be found at aim.org/research. And then we also have with us Thomas Demler, and he's the Director of Product Management for Extended ECM Applications at OpenText. And Thomas is a product management leader with more than 20 years of experience in product management, consulting, and R&D in the enterprise software market. And he is passionate about building innovative products with a great team and working together with a global community of extended ECM experts and users. So right now we're going to turn things over to John Mancini to begin our discussion today. John?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you, Teresa, for that introduction, and welcome, Thomas, to the webinar. I really am looking forward to the conversation that we'll have here today. For those of you who are not in the northern United States or the eastern United States, all the conversation here is about how daggone cold it is right now. So we'll try to warm things up a little bit for everybody, and we'll all be glad that we're not having to go outside in order to attend this meeting. We can do it right from the desktop. So what Thomas and I thought we would do is I wanted to tee up some issues and some data that we've noticed in the marketplace over the course of the last year, and then go from there to explore those in a little bit more detail in a bit of a conversational style. So that'll be the approach. I usually like to remind people as well, as Teresa said, you can resize those windows on your screen. So if you want to make the presentation bigger, you can do that. And then also remind you to ask questions. We love to get the questions. It makes things a bit more interactive towards the end, and we'd love to get the questions. So please feel free. So what I thought I'd do is start. We're going to have 4 questions that I'm going to tee up. But before starting there, I wanted to maybe have a bit of a conversation about the starting point of all this. And those of you that know me know that I've been doing this content management thing for longer than I probably care to admit. And one of the things I think that is going on in the marketplace is that traditional ECM solutions served us very well in terms of automating those mission-critical, document-intensive, large-scale processes in our organizations back in the 90s and 2000s. But we've realized that there are some limitations to those approaches, and that some of the legacy approaches, no longer meet some of the needs that we have moving forward, and those approaches need to be modernized, that there's a new generation of content services to take what you have and extend it into the next generation. And so as you think of this, I thought it would be, I'd tee up kind of just some, who, what, where kinds of questions to maybe start the conversation, and then get Thomas's perspective on these in a moment for how this has perhaps changed how OpenText looks at the marketplace. And So when I think about these, as I mentioned, we started this on the what question with digitizing and automating large-scale content-intensive processes. The who was focused on business process owners and compliance and legal folks initially. And as we think about this now in terms of why things are changing, what organizations are trying to do is free up resources to improve their competitive advantage, but they don't want to lose control of compliance along the way. And so, where is content management occurring now? Where are content services trying to be deployed? Really, it's across the organization, and that's different from the way content management used to be 10 or 15 years ago. And so the objective now, in terms of when does this occur, organizations are increasingly trying to get their content capabilities so that they occur in real time, and so that things like classification occurs in real time, tagging occurs in real time, that kind of thing. And the way to go about that is really with a focus on metadata-enriched processes and content, and with the injection of content directly in those processes, so that we start to move beyond this kind of dual screen phenomenon that has been characteristic of the past. So, Thomas, I thought I'd stop here for a second, and before we hop into our 4 questions, maybe talk a little bit about how this is, how this matches up with the way you guys view the marketplace, and, maybe what's changed about your view of the marketplace in the last few years.
Yeah, hi, John. So what we have seen is it's really, and you mentioned it, it's about business processes. So we talk about content services, and these content services, in earlier days, it was sometimes about being standalone, supporting the business processes, but now it's really about supporting business processes, and these business processes, they are very often driven by leading applications. So leading applications like a Salesforce system for CRM processes, a SuccessFactors system for HR processes. And that is the goal now, being integrated, seamless with these systems, because these business processes that we want to be compliant, that we want to improve in their efficiency, they are very often driven by these leading applications.
And so when you think about this, I think one of the things that I just wanted to highlight on this chart is this notion of digital survival. And, when you think about where we've changed over the past decade, we've really changed from this being something that maybe was nice to have and important, but not critical to survival. And really these capabilities that Thomas talks about now in terms of extending content into lead applications really is a matter of digital survival moving forward. And so the 4 questions that we wanted to talk about today with regards to intelligent automation, we wanted to talk about, first of all, why is a new approach important? Why do we need to maybe view this differently than we have in the past? Secondly, talk about how is unstructured information a stumbling block to where people are trying to go with intelligent automation? How do we think about this problem with regards to content and lead applications? And, do we need a new concept of how we think about digital workspaces in order to, give us a different perspective on how to attack the problem? And then lastly, as you start to look down the path, what are some of the benefits of extending ECM into lead business applications? So let me start with this question of why a new approach is needed. And when you think about this, I think, where we are right now is that organizations are struggling with this question of keeping pace, keeping pace with the volume of information coming into the organization, keeping pace with the variety of information coming into it and the pace at which it comes in, and then also trying to keep pace with how do they match their content capabilities and their information management capabilities with all sorts of other capabilities that are evolving at the same time. And so when we ask this question, it's pretty revealing, I think, for me, is when we say how big a problem is information overload and information chaos in your organization. And so what you have here is essentially 75% of the people that we talked to a few months ago said that they saw information overload and chaos as a significant problem for their organization. And so as you think about this, what does that mean in terms of what does it say about why a new approach is needed and how do organizations view this? And so these two data points, I think, are really critical to thinking about content and content management in a new way. So the first one on the left, basically was an agree-disagree question we asked, which is that, our organization wants to pick only the information capabilities that we need for each process or application. And that's really important because that's a different way of looking at content management than the monolithic way that we traditionally looked at ECM. And so that translates into an even broader consensus amongst the folks that we teed up, which is this idea of, do you need to modernize your information management strategy? And you can see from the bottom two orange bars there, significant agreement that that's really an organizational priority. So you marry those together, information overload, a significant problem for the organization. Organizations want to think about deploying content capabilities in a more modular fashion than they ever did before, and they're intent on modernizing their overall infrastructure. And that really, I think, comes right down to the question of why you need a new approach to integrating content and lead business processes. And so, Thomas, maybe you could put that in a little bit of context in terms of how you view this and view this connection, if you will, between content and process, which has always been the heart of a lot of what we do, but the way people view it is changing.
Yeah, so John, as you just said, it's about having the enterprise content management, the capabilities we are all aware, and the new thing is about, putting them into the business context. So integrating them deeply into applications, into leading applications, so that we have really content-enriched business processes. And why are we doing this? So it gives us new possibilities to improve the process efficiency, and also gives us new capabilities to think about compliance. So this goes into the direction of having more automation, actually. So having now the data, the structured data, the unstructured data, having them combined. Now we can apply this information and make the processes more efficient. So for an employee, for example, managing these documents, we could do it standalone, but connecting it to an HR system, then we get an information about, is the employee still employed with the company? Is he already retired? This gives us completely new possibilities thinking about the compliance angle, for example. Then we can start records management. As we know now, he's no longer with the company. Now it's a new phase for our lifecycle management of the documents. And this is the things, I'd like to discuss with you today then in this session about how can we use this connectivity of the systems and the ECM services for intelligent automation, and what are actually the tools, the frameworks we actually need to implement this approach.
So I think those are some really important concepts there. And I think, some of the things when I think about takeaways of what's going on right now as people think through these questions, I use this word intentionally, extend organizational and governance strengths into processes where information is created and used. And so what I mean by that is that there's a temptation when people say modernize to think immediately like, throw everything out and start over again. And the reality is that A, that's not practical, and B, it's really not smart either, because organizations are sitting on incredible information resources. If they can just figure out how to harness them differently, they really have an awful lot of opportunity kind of moving forward. And so as you think about this, I think one of the things that strikes me all the time is that, and people in this space have been doing this a long time. We've been talking about unstructured information. We've been talking about content for a long time. And so as you move down this path, then to think about this more strategically in the context of integration with lead business processes, and as you think about intelligently automating your organization, sometimes I think there's a tendency to move immediately to the process automation and not think about why and how content is still a key stumbling block to doing that effectively. So I have a couple data points that I wanted to tee up in that regard to get your 2 cents on, Thomas. So the first one is this one of volume, and tied to that is what is that volume, which comes to the variety of information. So we asked this question, about 2 months ago, is that, think about all the information in your organization. What would be your best guess for the percentage that is unstructured? And what I was trying to drive at with this question is not to say that the management of data is unimportant, because it certainly is, but that managing data is not the only part of the problem that exists, that content is a key part. And so, that has to do with things like, you think about all that content and unstructured information that surrounds us on a day-to-day basis, emails and social and forms and faxes. And then you think about the business processes that we use in order to get our work done. And the key challenge is that those two aren't really effectively married in most organizations. And so when you look a little bit further into this, and you look at some of the data associated with this, on the left-hand side, what you have are some data points from a survey from last year that we did that basically look at the question of, okay, content management has done a great job of automating particular processes, but how well has it done at the question that we're talking about today, which is integrating content capabilities within other business processes, within lead business processes, line of business processes. And so what you see here are some gaps that exist. I think it's tied to that question earlier about this quest for less monolithic approach to content management. But clearly, organizations are struggling and in need of a different approach of thinking about this question of integrating those capabilities, because the monolithic way of doing it just hasn't really met their needs. Then you come over to the right-hand side. And again, sometimes I think people look at point SaaS solutions, and they'll say like, we can automate this that way. And certainly there's some benefit to thinking about SaaS solutions in that regard to some of these business processes that are on this chart. But if you do it in the absence of a content strategy, if you don't think about the content requirements that are tied to those business processes, you're destined to not succeed. And so you look at this question for each of the following processes. Think about how much of a challenge semi-structured and unstructured information represents in your efforts to automate. And what you can see by that turquoise-ish and I guess orange bars there, it represents a significant challenge for organizations. So key takeaway there, unstructured information, still a key stumbling block to intelligent information automation. And so let's talk a little bit about this, Thomas, from the perspective of how you smartly utilize information. And then maybe you could talk about this match between information and business efficiency.
Yeah, so what I just saw in your diagram was it's actually about all these various business processes where people see possibilities to improve the efficiency by adding the content to these data-driven processes. So, and then we talk about this fancy term, intelligent automation. And so how do I see it? What does it really mean, intelligent automation? So having these worlds combined now, I get a lot of information from other sources. So I get information from these leading business applications. I get information like data, let's say customer data, sales opportunity, employee data, stuff like this. Relationships. I know the relationship between a customer, sales opportunity maybe, also service case to this one. So I get a lot of information, roles, events, and I can now use this information in order to make the business process itself more efficient. So I can use this data, for example, I get from a sales opportunity to tag automatically all the documents with this data, which might change over time because it is updated in a leading application. But having tagged now the documents there, I will find it automatically, even if the data has changed. So that is one thing to make my search way more efficient. I could also use it in a different way. So now I have role information. I could now show the document of interest to the right person. So I know, I think in one of your processes, it was also about manufacturing, maintenance, or stuff like this. So I now know there is a technician maybe who is looking at the content. So I could serve the right documents at the right time to this person. So let's say I know it is a maintenance order. And this person, the technician, now needs the content in order to execute on this maintenance order. So now I can combine all this information and show him some guidelines, some manuals, how to do this actually. If it is someone like the manager, I might provide other information. But it's not only the information we get from business applications. Looking further down the road, there we have this, we call it nowadays cognitive services. So, and there, OpenText, we have our own cognitive services, which we can use, but we look further even down the road. So there are others, the big vendors like Google, Amazon, they also provide cognitive services. Maybe there are some services we do not have. So let's integrate these services and then process them in a smart way so that we then, again, can improve what we are actually showing to someone working with our application. Could be used for, so let's say we know the language of the document automatically. Now we know the person who logged in, he is French speaking, he gets automatically either French translation of the document or if it is available, a French document. There are a lot of ways to automate the whole process if we really combine these worlds, thinking about information coming from a leading application, cognitive services, or even going to mobile and knowing where I am, for example, at the moment.
Yeah, when you think about this, I think this topic is really tied into exactly what I want to talk about next, which is this question of digital workspaces and digital value chains and how they connect together. And I think, when you think about this chart that you just went through on information and business efficiency, these occur in chains of connections. And I think one of the things that we struggle with is how do we think about that in our organization? How do we educate people about that? And so, when I think about this, some of this is obvious, but it's undervalued and not well understood within organizations. That when you start to think about processes from an outside-in perspective, when you start to think about them from a customer experience perspective, it changes the way that you view these processes. Because then, for example, a customer acquisition and fulfillment process is not just one process, it's a value chain of multiple workspaces and multiple processes. And I think one of the challenges in organizations, as you start to think about this, is that organizations have traditionally viewed these questions from a departmental-centric lens, and so they have their own way of thinking about tasks, their own way of thinking about information, their own systems that they use. And so, I think this concept, when you start to think, for example, about that process I talked about earlier, you conduct campaigns, you interact with customers, you have a sales order, there's also a financial process in there, there's the product workspace that involved with how you create a product, the case workspace in terms of, how do you fulfill and comment on customer experiences. All that stuff has process associated with it, tasks, it has people, it has content, and it has data. And I think until we start thinking about that in an integrated way across those processes, that's the breakthrough I think that organizations have to get to, because that's a different way of thinking about business processes than has traditionally been the case. And so as you think about this, I'd really like you to expand on this, Thomas, because I've liked some of the stuff that I've heard you talk about in this regard, and this idea that digital workspaces are a new way of thinking about how you view process.
Yep. So think about the entities you are aware of, the real-world objects. So I mentioned some of them already. So there is an employee, there is a customer, and the customer, that is managed maybe in an ERP system or in a sales, for example, like a Salesforce system, an SAP system. Now, we need to use exactly the same language. I think you mentioned before a common language. So this is the language of these leading applications. And we need to use, so talking about content services, ECM, exactly the same language. And that's in our world then, these digital workspaces. So they are kind of digital twins then to the objects in the leading applications. And now we bring everything together. So we bring the data. We get some of the data, not everything. The leading system is still the master of the data. We bring this together, but it has the benefit, as you can see it on the right side, that is the way we have implemented it, the way we visualize it, such a digital workspace. There's a customer workspace, and there you see data. You don't have to type it into the content system. It is just inherited from a system like, let's say, Salesforce as context. So you get it. And even if you work outside, you have your content in context. That's the way we phrase it. It is people. So you get the information. So Salesforce, you know who is responsible for a customer, who is working on a sales opportunity. You get all this information. So, and from the one side, you can use this for informational purposes. But there is more. Now you know the roles. Now you can control the permissions on the content. So you might have the account manager working on an opportunity. He has full right on all things related to this customer. There might be other people, like an assistant, just having read-only right on this one. And so we really bring everything together with this concept, so that we have data, the people which we get, which we can use for business processes. Obviously, we manage the document. Sometimes we forget it, but that's obvious. That's in our nature. That's what we can do. And last but not least, we can also manage tasks that has to be accomplished. And it's not just about static information management. It's also about doing some jobs, doing some processes. And going one step further, it's not only thinking about one item, one digital workspace. So you get the real big benefit if you look at the whole value chain of a process. So there we have visualized a process from sales, starting working on a sales opportunity, maybe even before campaign, and then how many people are involved actually to doing this. And I think that's an interesting point. You see, for example, here the account executive. This person, he's used to work inside Salesforce, but he would like to get the full power of everything we call content services. We can do this. We have to provide this inside the Salesforce. And then he can manage all documents, can maybe generate documents like a quotation. And then he creates a quotation. Then another person, let's say a lawyer, a legal person, has to review this one, but that person does not work inside the Salesforce user interface. He's not used to that. He might use our web user interface. And so you go along these processes, then going to the execution of the sales order. Maybe there's a SAP system involved. And they all work on this common model of these digital workspaces, which are then linked. So there we come to this relationship concept. They are all interlinked, and they can look at these various workspaces to get the information they are interested in. So that's a huge, huge benefit. And as we said at the beginning, it's a lot about improving the business process efficiency. And that's a great framework actually to accomplish this, having all these various workspaces. And then let's combine it with what we said before, this intelligent automation. So it's not just doing simple uploading, downloading of content, of documents. For example, so email, you mentioned it before, John. It's a lot about email. The account executives, I know they use a lot still email. And now we could just see they get an email. We have it connected to the Salesforce system, so we know the opportunity. We could either automatically store it there or either just giving a recommendation to store it there. And that continues in this way. So as we have these different roles I mentioned before, so we can also now visualize in a role-specific way the content to the individuals, store the content automatically, having the additional information through, let's say, cognitive services who automatically maybe recognize that a document is a sales quotation, that a document is a contract, that a document is a work permit. So combining all these various, so the automation and the integration, which results then in really greatly improved business processes. What do you think, John?
I think there's some really interesting points here that, as I've thought about this, which is, the first one is that there's two dimensions, I think, to the kind of change that organizations are struggling with. The first one is a technology-centric one, and often when people, adopt purely a technology-centric approach to this, it leads them to go in a, solving one of the silos of problems here, and so they'll solve the problem in the campaign workspace with a marketing automation tool, or they'll solve it on the service side with a case management tool. And certainly there's benefits in that kind of automation that occurs. But I think the real breakthrough for organizations is when they start to think of this more from a conceptual perspective and understand it also from a change management perspective, is that one of the educations that need to occur in organizations is to work towards an objective of getting people to think about the problem in a similar way. And that's, I think, where these little circles on the bottom, I think, are particularly interesting to me, because if you can get your finance folks and your accountants and your legal people and your account execs and, your production people thinking in a consistent fashion about the problem, then the technology side becomes, it's not easy, but it becomes much more feasible than if you do that in isolation. And so this idea of considering each workspace as part of an overall system, I think, becomes, I think, an important conceptual framework to bring to the change management process of how you think about these technologies and the technology innovations that you're trying to make. So the last thing that I just wanted to think through, and I'll be very quick on this point and turn it over to Thomas, because I think he's got a really interesting checklist to go through, is, come back to that why question again that we sort of started things with, is, what are some of the key benefits? And, they occur in areas like automation, automating information flows, delivering content in context, being able to distribute information in real time, enhance productivity, better decision making. And I think, an incredibly important thing is when you think about automating processes, when you think about intelligent automation, you don't want to abandon everything that we've learned over the years about compliance and records and life cycle management, because you still need those tools in order to stay in compliance. And then I think the last thing that I find just a really interesting jumping off point for organizations is when they think about information, when they think about automating the processing of information, they're getting short-term benefits for sure. But what they're also doing is setting the stage for the next generation of AI and machine learning capabilities, because people can talk about AI and machine learning till they're blue in the face, but if they can't digest the unstructured information in their organization, those initiatives will fail. And so by thinking about this from the perspective of intelligent automation, you're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting short-term benefits, and you're also setting the stage for longer-term benefits. And so, Thomas, I think, you had some suggestions about some steps maybe to go through in terms of how you think about this question of digitizing your business.
Yeah, so it is nothing you can do in isolation. It's about business processes. So you have to identify the business domain that at the moment might fit the best. So from my personal experience, so all of these processes are good. So you can start wherever you would like to start. So I've seen customers starting on HR side because they have currently a project, they want to revamp HR, maybe introducing a new HR system. I've seen this in the context of success factors very often. So that is what you need to do first. So identify the business domains and then see what are the leading business applications which are used there. Because as that outlined there, you want to integrate them. So you want to be part of these business processes that are driven by these leading business applications. Let's see, is there already a repository? Do we need to integrate this? Do we need to migrate this? You need to check this. And one thing I always try to remind people, it is about business, so you need to talk to the business owners. So there are some people, there might be the head of HR, the head of procurement. They need to be your sponsors, actually. You need to have their buy-in because you want to improve the business processes they are in charge of. And I've seen it very often. So if they are open to this, then it can be really a great project. It can be a fantastic project, and they will be happy about it, having their employees seeing that they are now way more efficient doing their job. Some technical stuff, is it cloud on-premise? Yeah. You need to make this decision there. Nowadays, a lot is available as a cloud service, also on the cloud services side. Then it is start small. So you want to start in one department, in one country, and then let's expand it, doing it globally. You are, and John, you mentioned, it's an organizational change which you are a part of. It's not just archiving some documents. You are part of an organizational change. That is not that easy. And it's not only technology, it's a new way you introduce to these employees how to work with content. So, last but not least, look for the vendor who has experience in doing this. Look for the implementation partner. And that is the kind of next steps I would recommend if you would like to follow this approach, which I have seen as a very successful approach in our customers.
I think this is a really useful checklist because I think one of the things that people struggle with is where to start, and so and they kind of see the opportunity and they see some of the challenges and they don't really have a sense for how to get their arms around it. And so as you walk through these questions of identifying the domains you're going to use and the leading business applications, you start going down this checklist. I think it gives you a good way of winnowing down the opportunities. Do it in a consistent fashion. And then figure out which project to start with. And, where do you have a business owner? Where do you have a business voice in order to help push the process to fruition? And I think once you do that, then you can kind of step and repeat because now you have a common framework for looking at the problem. But you got to start somewhere, and I think this is a good checklist for doing that. So we've put together a little infographic about this, and it's in the resources section of the presentation. And you can kind of take a look at that. Feel free to use it in your organization to help walk people through what intelligent automation is about and thinking about what it means to put content in some sort of business context moving forward. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over back to Teresa. And Teresa, I think you're going to walk us through some of the questions that people have submitted.
Yes, I am, and thank you. I've been so engrossed listening to you two talk today. We have been listening to John Mancini from AIIM and Thomas Demler from OpenText. And let me just jump right into the questions here. And the first one that I want to ask, someone had starts off with, in support of the end-to-end across applications model. How do you ensure that everyone is talking the same language, such as where everyone has the same understanding of the customer, et cetera? And also, if there are different definitions, how do you get them to align across the various steps in the process? I know a multi-layered kind of question. But Thomas, let me start that with you, and John, feel free to join in.
Sure. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I use an example. So using the same language. So there is the technical topic, and there is maybe more from an understanding point of view. So let's see. Salesforce used for managing a customer. Let's say then the other side, SAP is used for managing a customer. We have two leading systems. How do we map them? So Salesforce uses account, for example, as a customer. SAP is using their definition of a customer. So what we have done is we have provided kind of solution accelerators. So we have looked at these business processes. So that was our coming really back to the initial question, John, you asked me about. That was our learning that we had to do. So we had to understand these business processes and how they are modeled actually in the leading systems. So we have already done this work. So we would be able to match now the account, which is the customer on the Salesforce side, to the customer on the SAP side. That's one thing. Do they need to have exactly the same definition of a customer? No. Actually, it's sometimes even a benefit. So if you have them connected, so if both systems then have the same customer workspace, then you can even show inside SAP information coming from the Salesforce side, maybe about opportunities, and even being on the Salesforce side, you could show some information coming from, some additional information coming from the SAP side, maybe about executed sales orders or stuff like that. So, my view, John, how would you see it?
That's a really good question. I think, and I think it cuts to the heart of, what does it mean to be a digital business? In the environment that we're moving into. And when I think about that, maybe I'd answer it in a little bit of an unconventional way, is that, when I think about what we've done in the last 15, 20 years, it's all been about people, process, and technology. And the unfortunate reality is that often the way that we have approached these processes, if you want to assign kind of relative weights to how much time and effort and focus we've spent on people, process, and technology, we probably have been like a 10, 30, 60, 100% focus, 10% people, 30% process, 60% technology. And I think where we're at now, I think at the heart of this transition, I think, that Thomas is talking about, is to flip the pyramid upside down, and, what we need to do is spend, 50, 60% of our effort focused on the people side of the equation as a driver to help us think through the process and technology sides. And so when you do that, I think what you do a couple things. One is that if you start focusing on people, you inevitably start with where and how do people get their work done. Kind of that's point one. Point two then is when you start thinking about where and how they get their work done, that drives you into the business processes that they use in order to get their work done, which is what Thomas is talking about in terms of kind of where do they live on a day-to-day basis. And then the third thing is that when you start thinking about where and how they live and what technologies they use in order to get their work done, is if you could manage the content in those processes, more efficiently and effectively and delivered much more dynamically, what would be the implications for how much more effective they could be in terms of raising the value that they deliver to their customers? And then the last one, which is I think a big one and is super non-technical, is not neglecting the change management education that's associated with helping people across departments think about those problems in some sort of a common framework, which is, I would think, where some of that concept that Thomas talked about relative to digital workspaces, I think becomes a really important concept to help democratize and educate people on within the organization. Long-winded answer, I apologize.
No, it's all incredibly helpful. Thank you. And I do want to squeeze in another quick question. Thomas, this is directed directly to you. Throughout today's talk, you've been talking a lot, for example, how the extended ECM can connect to applications like SAP and Salesforce. Does the extended ECM have ways to integrate with other lead business applications other than SAP, Microsoft, Salesforce type products?
Yeah, so it is a framework. And I think that was what he said. It's a common language. And so on our side, we have pre-built enablers, sometimes really focusing on dedicated business processes, let's say like plant maintenance in SAP. But there are open APIs so that system integrators, but actually what I've seen, even customers by themselves can integrate this framework into their leading applications. This might be even proprietary applications. I've seen this. They have built by themselves. It is really about connecting to some, now I'm a little bit technical, REST web service, REST services, REST APIs, web services, and it's done, actually. You can decide how deep it shall be connected, whether you would like to have a UI integration or not. But it is doable. It's actually not that difficult. Yeah? Great question.
Well, I just wanted to take an opportunity just to talk about the AIIM conference that's coming up in less than 2 months. I can't believe it's here already. So join us in San Diego for this annual conference. One of our keynote speakers is going to be Blake Morgan, and she's a customer experience futurist. And our overflowing agenda is filling up very quickly with dozens of speakers, roundtable sessions, brain dates. There's so much. And it's all listed up on our conference website, and that's at aimconference.com. But one more thing to keep in mind, that we're going to have a pricing increase effective February 1st, so that's this Friday. So you want to reserve your spot today. So like I said, for more information about the sessions, who's going to be there, who the speakers are, and certainly information on pricing, and I know Michelle at AIIM will be there to answer your questions there through the instant chat feature that we have. But go to aimconference.com just to get all the information that's there for our conference. Look forward to seeing you there. And then also, just want to mention that AIIM has launched a new training course called Practical Artificial Intelligence for the Information Professional. And we are currently offering a $100 discount from this course when you use the promo code Intelligence2019. It's written on this slide here. And that special is also running through January 31st, which is tomorrow. So, when you download the PDF of the slides, there is a link to this slide there that's going to take you over to the promotion page. But do take advantage of that $100 discount off of this Practical Artificial Intelligence for the Information Professional course. And since we're getting to the end of our webinar time, I just want to remind you we have recorded this session, and come back and listen to it again. Invite your colleagues. Do download the resources. That infographic is over there that John mentioned. Very valuable information there. Please take the feedback survey. I do value that. And I do want to thank our underwriter, OpenText. Without support from our solution providers, AIIM would not be able to bring you these free educational programs like our whole webinar series. So thank you for your underwriting and your support, OpenText. So as we bring this webinar to a close, I just want to leave everyone with our speakers' closing thoughts today. And I'm going to begin first with Thomas Demler of OpenText. Your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I hope it was very helpful for the audience. So I think it is a great approach, and I would be very interested. So feel free also to reach out directly to me if you're interested. I'm always happy to give answers or to explain a little bit more on this concept.
Thanks, Thomas. And John Mancini from AIIM, your closing thoughts.
I think just a couple of things. One is, as you mentioned, Teresa, this is the week for the early bird discount at the AIIM conference. Don't neglect that. It's some significant money, and everybody's looking at money these days, so check that out. Secondly, thank you, Thomas, for some of your thoughts in preparation for this and got me thinking about some of these issues in a bit of a different way. And then thirdly, I think, and most substantively, is that as you think about that people process technology pyramid, which typically has, little tip on the top of people, broader space in the middle for process, and a big technology base, which is the way that we've traditionally thought about enterprise technology systems and enterprise technology capabilities. Flip it upside down, because if you flip it upside down, it'll start getting you thinking about how people work and how they get work done in a digital world, and get you thinking, I think, a little differently about how content plugs into lead business applications.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone. I do appreciate your time today. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. And have a great afternoon.